Hello guys, welcome to another video tutorial on the CoinRanking YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be showing us how we can create pagination using JavaScript. That is, we will not be making use of any form of package managers like npm or any form of external libraries. It's going to be purely vanilla JavaScript to create this pagination. So when you look at the page, here is the sample of the project. We have data coming from a REST API, that is the CoinRanking REST API. I've used this a couple of times or more on my YouTube channel, so I guess you might be familiar with them, but I'll go through how I was able to integrate the API once again. But first, let me show you how the pagination works. The data has a set of information concerning cryptocurrencies, that is the price, the rank, the tier, the name, price, as well as the symbol, and this data set we have is 50. So I decided to create a pagination that limits it to just 10 data per page. So when I click on the next button, you can see we have another set of data loaded to the page, like from 11. When you check the rank row, from 11 to 20, if I click on next, it brings up another set from 21 to 30, then 31 to 40, then 41 to 50. One thing you should take note of is once we reach the limit of the data being fetched from the API, the next button disappears. But if I click on the previous button, it appears again because we have data that we can fetch from the next button. But once we click back to the first page, the previous button disappears. So that's one functionality we were able to create in this project. So with that, I'm going to get started with it, so please stay tuned. If you have not liked or subscribed to this channel, please make sure you do, so that the YouTube algorithm can keep recommending my videos to other developers out there. So thank you very much for doing that, and with that, let's get started. So the next thing we need to do is to create the files for our projects. So I already created a folder in my terminal, and then I opened up the folder in my VS Code and then created two new files, the traditional files in web development, that is the index.html and the app.js file. So in this index.html file, I'm going to generate a boilerplate by typing the exclamation mark, and with the help of Emmet, I'll generate an HTML template. And inside of this HTML template, we're going to be using Bootstrap 5 to design the table. So quickly, I head straight to the Bootstrap 5 documentation to grab the CDN. So I type in Bootstrap 5 in the browser, and then inside of the website, I grab this CDN right here. So I click on copy and then head back to Visual Studio Code. Right in the head section, I will just paste it in. So with that, we have access to all the Bootstrap 5 classes needed to design the table. So no need for us to write any form of custom CSS. So the next thing we need to do here is to design the table, and to do that, we're going to create a div first before we create the table tag. So quickly, I'm going to create a div tag, and this div tag is going to have a Bootstrap 5 class called container, as well as we're going to give it two extra Bootstrap 5 classes. The first one is the margin top, which is 5 to give it a margin at the top, as well as the margin bottom, which gives it a margin at the bottom. So inside of this div, we can create our table. So to create a table tag, I'm just gonna give it some classes as well. So the first class is going to be table. So this table class is coming from Bootstrap 5 as well. Then from the sample I showed earlier at the beginning of the video, you see that the table is kind of dark, so we need to give it that class as well. So it's going to be table dash dark, as well as table slash dash striped, because the table was striped as well. And with that, I can just press enter, and then we have access to those classes. Now let's create the table head. So inside of the table head, we're gonna have the table row. So we have a tr, and inside of the tr rather, we have the table headers. Like I said, we're gonna be having up to 7 headers, and they all have a attribute of scope, which signifies for the column, which also signifies that this is the column. So the first one is going to be inside of the table head, is going to be called the BTC price. So I'm going to say BTC price, and then I'm going to duplicate this probably 6 more times, or let's make it 5. And after the BTC price, the next thing we have is the rank, followed by the tier, then the name follows next, then followed by the price, as well as symbol. Cool. So right under the table head, we need to have the table body. The table body, the design will be done inside of a JavaScript file. So for now, what we just need is the ID to be able to design the table body inside of our JavaScript. So I'm just gonna give it an ID of data. The table itself is also going to have an ID, so I'm going to give this an ID of listing table. Listing, or this should be inside of the quotes, listing table. I think that should be all for now. The next thing I would like to do is to design the button, that is the button, the previous and the next buttons. But before I do that, I just want to save this and see how it looks in the browser. So I'm gonna open it using Live Server. Live Server is an extension in VS Code that allows you to see the page on the browser. So as you can see, we have the BTC price, the rank, the tier name, price, as well as symbol. So next up, let's design this button. So to design the button, this is going to be also within the div tag that has the container class. So to create the button, I'm going to have a nav bar. So I'm going to give this a nav, create a nav tag, which is, so I'm going to create a nav tag, and inside of the nav tag, I'm going to have a UL and an LI, like a list. So this list is going to also contain a pagination class, because this is also coming from Bootstrap 5. So I'm going to give it pagination, and then the li tag is up next. So instead of the li tag, we're going to have a button as well. So the button we're going to call it prev. Let's call it previous, in fact. So let's call this previous, and then the li class also, the li tag also has a class. So I'm going to give it a class of page item, while the button is going to have an id, because we'll also be manipulating this in our JavaScript file. So I'm just going to give it an ID of prev button. So let me duplicate this li tag and then create the next button as well. So this is going to be next, and then instead of prev button, we're going to have next button as the ID. The li tag for the next remains page item, and with that, I think we can save and then check how it looks like in the browser once again. Okay, I don't like the look of this button to an extent, so I think there's one more class we might be missing, and that might be page link. So I'm gonna give the button a class of page link. So class is equals to page dash link. I'm gonna copy this, paste it in the button for the next, and then save. Yeah, the buttons look a bit nicer. Probably they need a space between them, so maybe I might just give the previous button a margin right of 2. So with that, I think there should be a space, a little bit of space between the previous button and the next button. Let's check the browser. As you can see, this looks a bit nicer. So the next thing we need to do is just to work with our JavaScript. We've done everything we need to do in the HTML file. So before we get started with that, we need to create a script tag that links the JavaScript with the HTML, so that the JavaScript can have access to the IDs we set in this HTML file. So quickly we create a script tag, and inside of this script tag, we create a attribute of src, and then it's going to have the name of the file, which is going to be app.js. So with that, we now have access to the JavaScript file. So let's get straight to the app.js file. So to get started with the pagination, we first need to create the REST API, that is load the data on the table. So to do that, we need to head straight to the CoinRanking documentation. So quickly I head straight to CoinRanking website, and on the landing page of the CoinRanking website, when I scroll down, I click on the API documentation. It opens a new tab straight up. So this is where we have access to the APIs, where the APIs are hosted. So on the sidebar by the left, I click on coins. Okay, before I click on coins, I need to grab the base URL of the CoinRanking website. So I'm going to grab this, https://api.coinranking.com/version 2. This is the version 2 of the API. I think this is the latest version. I think they have a version 1 at some point. So I'm going to create a variable. So I'm going to call this base URL is equals to. So inside of a quote, I'm going to paste it in. So the base URL is just there to determine what we want to do. So I'm going to click on coins next. What we want to do is to get a list of all the coins. So to get a list of all the coins, it has to be /coins, and which is a get request. So I'm going to copy this /coins, and then at the end of the base URL, I'm going to paste in the /coins, and with this we are good to go. So moving on, when I scroll down to the bottom of the CoinRanking documentation, to avoid any form of course errors, we need to create a proxy URL, but because we are trying to do everything from the front end, we will not be following the samples we have in this documentation, which shows how to create the proxy URL from the documentation using Node.js or PHP, which helps us avoid the course error. So instead, we'll be making use of something called course anywhere. I've used it before in one of my projects. So when I type course anywhere on Google search, and with that, we're gonna get a list of results of course anywhere. But I would suggest we click on this very first one, which is the npm package. Although we will not be making use of the npm package. We're making use of the link. The thing about course anywhere is that it's a Node.js proxy which adds course headers to the proxy request. That is, by default, it helps us to set the headers and helps us to prevent course error. So in this documentation here, I'm gonna scroll right to the bottom of the page, and then you will see this link here which says a public demo of course anywhere is available at. So you can see this link here. This is what we're gonna grab. So I'm gonna copy all of these and then head to our browser, to VS Code, and then I'm gonna create another variable called proxy URL. It's gonna be inside of a quote as well, and then I'm gonna give a forward slash in front of it. So what we just want to do is just to join them together, and probably we create another variable for that. So I can just do the API URL is equals to, I'm gonna make use of backticks. So the backticks allows us to join them together. So here we are. So the first one I'm gonna call is the proxy URL, and then the second one is gonna be the base URL. Now to see this in action, we need to create a new function that helps us to consume this REST API. And to do that, let me just add a comment here that says fetch data from REST API. And then this function is going to be called get data, and we're going to create this function using the async await keyword. The reason why we're making use of async await is async await is a simple method of managing or maintaining promise-based requests, and because we're making use of this API, we want to make the data we'll be getting load inside of a function we'll create when the page loads. So with the help of the async await, it helps us to configure that. So I'll show you the process in a moment, but first let's just try to log the data inside of the console. So I'm going to type in async. Why am I using uppercase? I'm going to make use of async function, and this function is going to be called get data, and then I'm going to open brackets. So instead of the brackets, I'm going to create my first variable. So I'm going to say const response is equals to await fetch. This is, we're making use of the fetch API. So the fetch is going to take in the variable for our API URL, which is the combination of this proxy URL as well as the base URL. Remember, the proxy URL, which is course anywhere, helps also prevent course error. And then we're gonna create another variable called, let's call this coins. So this coins is gonna also take in the await keyword, and then we're gonna return the response.json. So it's gonna be in JSON format. And then to see this in the browser, I'm gonna create a global function as well. So right under the API URL, I'm gonna create a global function called coins data. This is gonna take in an empty array for now. So this coins data is gonna hold the result of our API. So I'm gonna say coins data is equals to coins. Let me console log this coins data. Probably we can do that right below. So I'm gonna console log coins data, and then we need to call the function for us to see it in action. So I'm gonna type in get data and then save and head straight to the browser, right click, or you can use that command to open the console. So inside of the console, we should get some sort of results. For some reason, we're not getting anything in the browser. I think there must be an error somewhere. Let me check the HTML file. Probably we didn't link a JavaScript file properly, and I thought as much. This is supposed to be src, not scr, so it's supposed to be src. So I save once again and then head straight to the browser. Yeah, as you can see, we get a successful request. And inside of this request, we are able to get the data, and inside of the data we have the coins array, and inside of this coins array we have a set of 50 data, that is an array of objects containing 50 data. So this is what we're going to paginate. Instead of loading 50 at once on the page, we're going to load it 10 by 10 for the page size to strictly get this the coins. So I'm going to just say coins dot data dot coins. So you can see this is called coins. So that's what we are referencing in our code. So if I save once again and head straight to the browser, we should just get only the result of the coins. As you can see, 50 array of objects. We've been able to successfully fetch the data, but we don't want to fetch the data this way. So I'm going to get rid of the data we called right there, and instead we want to fetch it inside where the function where we load the table. So that's going to be another function. So to do that, I'm going to create a new function called render table. So I'm going to say async function and then render the table. So I'm gonna open a bracket. So yeah, this is where we're gonna call the get data function. So because we want it to load as at the point when this function is trying to load the table, that is the table row that contains data. So I'm just going to say await get data and then the function. So right under this, let's try to create our HTML to display the data we have in the API. So to do that, I'm going to create a comment probably that says create HTML what? Table row? No, table data. So table data, that is the TD, table data. I mean, there are so many ways you could do this, but I choose to do it this way to implement it from the JavaScript side. So this should be in lowercase. So right underneath of it, I'm going to create a new variable called crypto coin. Okay, let's just call it crypto coin. So the crypto coin is going to have an empty string. So right under it, we now have access, like if I console log the coins data, we will now have access to the coin data inside of this function. In fact, let me call the function right underneath of here. So I'm going to grab the render table and then call it right under where we have the function we created above, so that anything we do gets loaded when the page is displayed. To be sure that we have access to this coins data which we are loading from here, I'm gonna grab this console.log coins data and then paste it right inside of here and then load. Let's see if it also shows on the console. So I head straight to the console once more. As you can see, it shows on the console. We have access to it right inside of that function on app.js 11. I believe that's the line we are in. So that's app.js 11, which is excellent. Now, to get started, so I'm gonna say coins data. We need to filter through this. So I'm gonna make use of the filter method in JavaScript, and it's gonna take in two arguments. The first argument is gonna be, let's give it an argument of, although we might not be making use of the first argument, we just need the index out of these two parameters. So I'm just gonna give this one row, and then the second argument is going to be index. You can call this I, some people call it I, so I choose to call it index. I think that's more specific. So we're going to open a bracket, then we're going to create a variable. So the first one is going to say let's start is equals to, now we want to get the current page and the page size. So to do that, I need to create a variable above, like a global variable as well. So the first variable I'm going to create, I'm going to say let the page size we want, like I said, we want the page size to be 10. So let page size equals to 10, while the current page is going to be the first page. So let me just say let current page. So I'm going to say current page is equals to 1. So that's the first page. So since we now have these two variables, we can continue with the filtering of the coins data we're getting. So I'm going to say let start is equals to current page, which is the global variable created above, minus 1 times the page size, and then the end of the page we need to specify that as well. So I'm going to say let end page, then current page multiplied by the page size. So with this, we know when the page starts and when the page ends. So what we now want to do next is to create a condition before we now loop through this data and then append it into the table data in our which will show on our browser, that is appending into the HTML tag inside of our JavaScript. So for us to loop through it, we need to create a variable that if the index of the data we're getting from the CoinRanking API, if it's greater than or equals to the start of the page, and also if the index is less than the end of the page, then we can return true. So once we are able to return true, we can now make use of the for each method in JavaScript. So I'm going to say dot for each. So with this, we're going to loop through the coins. So we're going to say for each coin, and then make use of an arrow function, open the bracket. So this is where we now create the HTML table tag. So now we reference the crypto data variable we created right above. So I'm going to say crypto data, then append it to what's it called, the table row. So I'm going to open a quote here. So I'm going to say tr. So that's the table row is going to cover everything we are doing here. So I'm gonna close it off right here, table row. Now inside of this table row, we're gonna have our table data. So to have our table data, we're gonna also make use of the crypto coin variable here, appending to the table data. So this time around we're gonna make use of basics. So I know it's not fun writing HTML inside of JavaScript, but I'm gonna make sure we don't make any form of we'll try not to make too much mistakes here, because since we don't have access to intelligence and a lot of other things, probably the red lines that shows in HTML. So when we make mistake inside of this JavaScript file, we might not be aware of it, but let's try our best to write it the proper way. So let's open the TD tag. So inside of the TD tag, let me close it right off. So TD, I think that looks perfectly well. So instead of this TD tag, I'm gonna open a bracket, and then the first thing we want to load to the page is the BTC price, and we can grab that from when I open one of the objects. Let's open the first object. You can see the BTC price. This is the key. So I'm going to grab that and then head straight to the browser. And then for us to be able to get the price, because when I check for the other objects, this for Bitcoin, which is the first object we have here, we check another object, you see that the BTC price has so many decimal points, like it's more than 10, and we don't want to show all this on the page. It won't be a good user experience. So we want to limit it. So to limit it, we're going to make use of the to fixed keyword. So for us to make use of the to fixed keyword, we're going to first pass float. So I'm going to type in pass float, and then once I type in pass float, I'm going to open a bracket, and I'm going to say coin dot the BTC price we have in the objects, and then I'm going to say dot to fixed. So we are fixing this to show just six what's it called, six decimal points, instead of having this excessive number of decimal points we have here. I don't think that would be a good user experience. So now let's work for the others, which are the rank, the tier, the name, price, and symbol. So probably I might just want to bring this down 5 more times. So the next one, let's get rid of this pass float as well as the dots to fixed. We don't need that for the others. So quickly, the next one we need is rank. I think I can just say dot rank. As you can see, we have a rank keyword here. So coin dot rank, and then the next one is the tier. We want to get the tier, so coin dot tier. If you look at the object, you see these keys there. So the next one is name, so coin dot name, and then the price as well. We want to round the price up, so I'm gonna also make use of a JavaScript keyword called math dot round. So to do that, right in front of this bracket, I'm gonna type in math dot round, so coin dot price. So the coin dot price, so I want to round it up, so it's gonna round it up, and then we want to make it billions, so I'm just gonna type it as billion. So that's the price, and then there's one more key we are not referencing, and that's the symbol. So I'm gonna get rid of this math dot round and the billion what, so I'm just gonna type in symbol. And with that, I think we'll be able to input all the values necessary to be shown in the table data. Now for it to display on the page, we need to reference this ID we created here, which is right inside of this table body, which is data. So I need to grab this data by making use of the document.getElements by ID in JavaScript. So to do that, I'm just gonna say document, not documente. So document.get element by ID, and then it's gonna be in quote. So I'm gonna say data. So that will be the the parameter for that. So dot inner HTML. So this helps us to get the inner HTML of the HTML, and then append the crypto coin variable we created right above into it. So with this, I think the data should show on the browser. So I'm gonna save and then check the browser, and let's see. Excellent. As you can see, the data shows on the browser. We have the BTC price, we have the rank, the tier, the BTC coin, the price, as well as the symbol. So before I go forward, I just wanted to let you know about a warning in when you are using the what's it called, the course anywhere proxy URL link. Sometimes you might get a limit. Two things, in fact. The first thing is you might get a limit, like if you are working on the project and you are refreshing the page so many times. If you make more than 50 calls per hour, you might need to you won't be allowed to make more than that, and you might need to wait a bit. And the second one is the very first time you load in the course anywhere proxy URL, you might need to click. There's a warning message that might show on the console, and you might need to click on it, and then you give it the permission for it to show. So you should be aware of those two things. I'll put more information on this in the description on YouTube, so for you to avoid this stumbling blocks, or would I call it errors. So with that, we've been able to display the data on the table. So the next thing we need to do is to implement our previous button and our next button to do the pagination. What we need to do next is to create two functions that handles them. So the first function is going to be called previous page, and the next function and the function for the previous button is going to be called previous page, and the function for the next button is going to be called next page. So let's quickly create those two. So right under this render table function we are calling there, let's create the first one. So I'm going to say function, I didn't spell that correctly, function, I'm going to say previous button, or previous page rather. I'm going to open a bracket, and inside of this bracket we're going to create a condition that if our current page, that is this variable creates over here, if the current page is greater than 1, what do we want to do? We want to iterate backwards. So I'm going to say current page minus minus, and then now call our table once more. So we're going to call the function for the table, so it renders the previous page, the buttons that show for the previous page. So you get what I mean. In the case of next page, we're going to iterate forward by making use of the plus signs. So I'm just going to duplicate this, and then instead of previous page, I'm going to have function for the next, or what am I doing here? For the next, oh boy, for the next page. So we'll say if the current, this will be a little bit different. So we'll say if the current page multiplied by the page size, so the page size, then if the current page multiplied by the page size is less than the coins data dot length, then want to iterate. Okay, we didn't close the brackets here, so I'm going to close it right here to get rid of the error. So we are saying if the current page multiplied by the page size is less than the coins data.length, that is the length of the coin, then we iterate forward. So I'm going to make use of the plus sign, and then we render the table. So those are the two functions that work for the next page and then for the previous page. So one more thing we need to do is to get the IDs for each of the button. I don't know if we remember to create that. Yes, we did. So we need to make use of this previous button ID and this next button ID. We need to manipulate it in our JavaScript file. So to do that, I'm going to make use of document.querySelector this time around. So I'm going to say document.querySelector, and then inside of a string, I'm going to reference the, let me grab for the previous button, paste that in. So we're going to add an event listener to it. So dot add event listener, and then it's going to be a click event. So since it's going to be a click event, we now need to call the next page. We're dealing with previous page, so we need to call the previous page function we have here, and for now it's going to be false. So that's all we need to do. So we need to do the same for the next page as well. So I'm going to grab this next button ID, head straight to the JavaScript file, and then replace the prev button with the next button, and then this is gonna be, instead of previous button, we have the next button, the next function right inside of our event listener. So those are the two things we need to do, and we're almost done with this implementation. So I think we should also test it out to see how it functions for now. Let's see if it works. So I'm going to head to the browser, and then let's test it out. I'm going to clear the console and then press next. As you can see, it works already. We're able to do our pagination. So from here, we get the next set of 50 data. You can see we can't go beyond 50. So if you click next, nothing gets implemented. So let me close the console. So nothing gets implemented. If I go back, data gets to the functionality for the pagination is working. So one more thing we need to do is, I mentioned something in the introduction of this video. I said when we are at the very first page, I want the previous button to disappear, and when we are on the last page, I want the next button to disappear. So we need to implement that functionality. To make that work, we're gonna have to give a render table function a what's it called, we're gonna give it a parameter to track each of the pages we currently have. So I'm gonna create a parameter that's a variable right inside of this render table function. So I'm gonna say page is equals to 1. So if the page is equals to 1, let's create the conditions. So first thing I'm gonna say is if page is equals to 1, then what do we want to happen? We want the prev button dot style dot visibility, that is the CSS attributes, to be hidden. So let me grab the prev button, or I already have access to the history. So I'll just say prev button dot style dot visibility is equals to hidden. Then else, if it's not equals to 1, then we want it to be visible. So I'm just going to grab everything we have here and I'm going to set it to visible. So to see if this works, before I tried, okay, let's see if this works before we try for the next button functionality. We need to also give the render table function we are calling inside of the brief button. Since it has a parameter here, we need to give it a parameter down here as well. So we can just give it a parameter of current page. So no, this helps it to track the current page we currently are. So let me save and let's see if the previous button shows when we are at the very first page. As you can see, the previous button does not show. So another thing you can do is probably you can just put a disable, you can probably disable it. For me, I wanted to make it invisible. So when I press on next, okay, it doesn't show for now, probably because we've not implemented the next functionality. So once we do that, I believe it should show. So to do the condition for the next page, to make it to make it hidden and visible depending on the page we are currently in, we need to create a new function to do that. So right under the next page, I'm going to create a new function. So this is going to help us get precisely the page size we currently are. So the number of pages we are currently at, that's if we're on the last page, is going to disappear. So to do that, we're going to create a new function called number of pages. So inside of this function, we're going to return by making use of math.ceil. And inside of math.ceil, we're going to have the coins data.length. That is, we're going to have the coins data.length and then divide it by the page size. That should help us know the page number we currently are. So I'm going to type in coins data.length divided by page size. So with this, we're gonna be able to track the page number we currently are. So with this, we can implement the condition to show to toggle the next button when it's meant to be visible and when it's meant to be hidden. So I'm just going to copy this function and then head straight up, and then right here I'm just going to create another function, another condition that says if the page size, or if the page, which is the parameter we create above, if it's equals to the number of pages, that is the value of the number of pages we have in the number of pages function, then this is what we want to do. We want to, let's grab the next page. We want to, oh, not next page, we're going to grab the number next button ID in our HTML and then style the visibility to hidden. So if the page size is 10 and then the number of pages is 10, that's the last page, is going to be hidden. Then else, if that's not the case, we want to show it. Else to be next button, let me just grab this instead of typing it out, and it's going to be set to visible. So I'm gonna save. I think that's all we need to do. Yeah, I think we can try it out and let's see if it works the way we expect. So I head straight to the browser and then click on next, next, and then finally I expect the next button to disappear. For some reason it doesn't. I think we might, let me check the console if we have any form of error. I think we might have made a mistake somewhere. Okay, no error in the console. I think we might have made a mistake somewhere. Let me check. Oh, in the next page function, we did not set the variable, that is the parameter for the render button, because the render table function, because now we set the parameter here, so it has to be set here to be able to track the current page it's the table is currently at. So let's head back to the browser and see if it works right now. So I'm going to click on next. As you can see, the previous button shows. So if I go back once more, it disappears because we are currently on the first page. So when I click on next, it comes up again. And then when we now get to the last page, I expect this next button to be hidden. As you can see, it's hidden and we are left to the previous page. So as you can see, the functionality for our pagination works perfectly well, and we are able to do this making use of Vanilla JavaScript using a REST API. So it's as close as a reward project as much as possible. That's why I try to make use of live REST APIs for these tutorials. So if you have any questions, drop it in the comment section. I'll be there to answer your question 100% of the time. I reply to almost all my comments. In fact, I can say I have a 100% reply rate. Thank you very much for watching.